not heated as it was in this time. And the absence of the Hollywood stars kind of playing around in it. Other than that, it looks as it did when it was built in the early 30s. So as the LA Coliseum was built for the Olympics in Los Angeles in 1932, first built this pool as he turned an Olympic swimmer named Johnny Weissmuller from Tarzan. Another one named Flash Gordon, Buster Pratt and Flash Gordon.
I said I promise you.
Hearst didn't think it was a good idea because it was not free trade. Must have free trade, right? Any government that tells a citizen it can't sell something, that's not the free market. And for a man who was born when Abraham Lincoln was president, that's radical. So Hearst objected to the National Art Treasures Acts that they began to take effect in the 1930s. Those who study them suggest at this point what has happened is not the stopping of objects crossing borders, but the increase of their cost. So the last of these to be sold was sold in New York. This one was sold for $6,000 in 1926. The last one sold brought $700,000 at auction. Had been the property of a man named John Lennon. Tanks. Either tower is a 2,000-gallon water tank. Gravity fed from reservoirs to the south of us. The reservoir is 1.25 million gallons, 70 feet higher than the towers are. So it's gravity feed down from the reservoirs through the walls of the house into either tower. And the springs are what fills these reservoirs. So 5 miles east of us and 1,000 feet higher yet, springs run the water downhill, up on top of this hill, and then downhill again through the walls of the house into the towers. Beneath the water tanks are bedrooms at the base of either tower, in 1937 occupied by a guest named Aldous Huxley. He and his wife Maria stayed up there. 2 years later, he published a book called After Many a Summer Dies the Swan, about an American millionaire who built a castle on top of a hill, stoked it full of art, lived with a woman who wasn't his wife, and wanted to be immortal. Kind of a familiar ring to me for something. He also had dinner with a wild man who had just pulled off one of the great media events of American history. It was called the War of the Worlds radio broadcast, October of 1939. Considered one of the great success stories of American media, having convinced the American public that Mars had landed. It worries me that American media thinks that's called successful. And then he created another successful media event, probably the most successful as far as the art form of cinema, still considered one of the greatest films ever made, Citizen Kane, released in 1941. 50 years. And the tiles around the towers were made in San Jose, California. Let's go back inside now and look at the actual collection.
Under the wood and all. Yeah. Peut-être de glace.
Surrounded by objects that are on average about 400 years in age. The choir panels around the room are at Central Italian church pews, so 400 and 500 years ago. Above them, tapestries finished in 1550, designed by Ernest Romano, by a French nobleman, or I should say for a French nobleman St. Alban. His symbol right over my head, the black shield with the white cross, the Catholic League of France. So his queen, Catherine de Medici, has sent him into battle with the Catholics against the Protestants in France as these statues are being made. A warrior, a man who was in fact a military leader, saw the image in these tapestries as someone to emulate. The man you're looking at in the tapestries is a Roman general who lived in the 2nd century BC named Scipio Africanus. Africanus was the man who Peter Paul Rubens, the designer of the tapestry over the north window. 1623, its completion. The work of Virgil Torvaldsen in 1812. So as Washington, D.C. burned down in 1812 under the hand of British troops, and when they rebuilt the executive mansion, they painted it white. That's when they painted it white. Before that, it was done in off blue. Anyway, these were being made that year. These are antique, 250-year-old Spanish bird. But the crosspiece was designed by Julia Morgan, who designed the house first. Yeah. So the office reflects the age person. An old Latin word that means to believe. Some people still say, bring their food, kitchen, put it on their credentials, serve their guests. The owner of the house sits down, takes the first bite. As for 2,000 years, one of the most common causes of death is poison. Where furniture is a form of technology, so is architecture. You don't design a building just because it's pretty. You design it to house yourself. If you're designing a building 400 years ago, or designing a building that looks like it's 400 years old, the annual brings Nebuchadnezzar or Babylon. The combined length of the tapestries and fire spells necessitated 67 feet as the length of the room. And were installed in 1927. Hearst then searched for the next 6 years for a ceiling that would fit the room. Finally, in Bologna, found one and had it installed, though it was not the length of the room, so they had to add 3 feet coppers to the end of it to make it long enough for the room. The fireplace, when he bought it, was 11 feet in height, and then they added in cast concrete up the ceiling. It appears it was really 27 feet. This is the room that Groucho Marx thought was 60 feet high. His wine sister is English, 1710 day. And what's called Britannia silver. Britannia is 97.5% pure silver. Sterling is 92% silver. This is pure sterling silver. So give it a little bit more of a festive feel. So join me. We'll walk where it merged into an organization called Metro Goldwyn Mayer, which was that year formed. And from that date to 1931, this actress, Miss Davies, was the highest paid actress of Metro Goldwyn Mayer. Feeling insecure about her acting ability, she was investing the money she was making in real estate, like Columbus Circle in New York City, is hers. Produced Kismet in 1936 on Broadway. Died in 1961, the last time you might have seen the woman who shared Hearst's life the last 30 years. Was on John F. Kennedy's inaugural stand on the arm of his father, Joseph Kennedy. You'll see Miss Davies in the film you're going to see. You'll also see the architect, Julia Morgan. But Julia Morgan will be misidentified in the course of the film as Hearst's secretary. The woman identified as Hearst's secretary is not.
When you've collected home movies for over 30 years, you naturally accumulate an awful lot of pictures. I've moved around a lot the last 3 decades, so locating and looking at miles of film for interesting shots with a king-size scavenger hunt. It's like rummaging through an old attic. You turn up a lot of junk, but occasionally, if you're lucky, you may find a rare masterpiece. And I think I did. It was a long-forgotten can of film. Lifting the lid was almost like opening King Tut's tomb. For inside were pictures which no one had ever seen before. Home movies, taken years ago within the confines of the largest, costliest, and most imposing private estate on the North American continent, San Simeon, the fabled citadel of William Randolph Hearst. Today, San Simeon is a state monument. But during its heyday, which spanned the roaring 20s and the fabulous 30s, it was the gathering place of the Hollywood immortals, with guests like Marie Dressler, seen here clowning with the host, William Randolph Hearst. That outfit she's wearing looks like a flea-bitten version of Touch of Me. That pretty blonde over there with the short bobbed hair is Marion Davies. Although she typified glamour on the screen, at San Simeon she joined in the fun. Marion Davies was one of the best-liked members of the motion picture colony. Beloved by everyone who knew her, she endowed many charities still in existence. That's Charlie Chaplin kidding around. The man coming out of the door at that moment was the mayor of New York City, Jimmy Walker. If these pictures seem to reflect a certain frivolity, you must remember they were taken at that wonderful carefree period in our history. The First World War had ended, and the second one was nowhere in sight. That youth on the right is Adolph Manchu. Yes, notables from every walk of life visited San Simeon. That's Paul Block, the newspaper publisher, chatting with the mayor. The fellow kneeling down in front of this group is George K. Ott, the comedian. And the attractive girl on the left in the print dress is Hedda Hopkins. Standing next to Hedda is the founder of America's largest bank, APG&M. John Gilbert and his wife, Virginia Bruce, Claire Windsor, and Dolores Del Rio. They're down at the tennis court, watching Chaplin hit a few to Bill Tilden. That teenager on the right is Carol Lombard. Nothing pleased the host more than when everybody got out of doors in the afternoon to take part in some group activity. He was proud of San Simeon and eager for his guests to enjoy it to the full.